Well, yesterday was the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules hearing where they had the Illinois State Police rules on the gun ban and registry. And that's where you've got to, of course, register your firearms within a certain amount of time, or you could face criminal penalties, either a Class A misdemeanor up front, or the second and subsequent offenses could be a Class 3 felony. So yesterday, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, we're going to delve into some of the weeds here, but I think it's important people understand where we're at in this process because as we've talked about, you've got the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals that are still sitting on a potential ruling for the challenge against the state's gun and magazine ban based on Second Amendment grounds. So that's still pending in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals about Illinois' gun and magazine ban. But you also have the measure being challenged back in the Southern District of Illinois. And that federal court heard last week arguments that the law was too vague. And when you get to the vagueness questions, it becomes evident for the Second Amendment supporters out there, the gun rights supporters, that the rules are too vague. And they want more clarity if this thing is going to be upheld. But it's still uncertain if the law is actually going to be upheld, as it faces challenges again in the 7th Circuit, still pending, and in the Southern District with a potential ruling out of that district. Possibly in the weeks ahead, who knows? Courts move at their own pace, so we'll definitely be watching that. But JCAR, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, is a legislative body. It's equal parts Democrat, equal parts Republican. Despite there being a Democrat supermajority at the Illinois State House, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules is truly bipartisan. There's 5 members of Democrats, there's 5 members of Republicans, and split among the members of the House and the Senate, and so on. So you can see that it's bipartisan, and how many members there actually are, where I think there's 6 and 6, but only 10 were at attendance yesterday, but they were equal Democrat and Republican. Either way, you've got the issue of these rules that were put into place by Illinois State Police. These rules were emergency basis, filed last month. The registry opened October 1st. Illinois State Police show that only about 1,000 people have actually registered things, about 3,000 items. Most are, of course, firearms that meet the definition the Illinois legislature banned. Semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, handguns. They also banned magazines, but you don't have to register your magazines over a certain capacity. But you do have to register attachments and accessories. What exactly are those? This is where you get into the vagueness issues. There's a lot of questions about the firearms, of course, that you have to register, but there's questions about the attachments, and I think that's evident in the numbers that Illinois State Police has published, showing that it's only 17 accessories have been disclosed to Illinois State Police. So that's where we're at now. A little over, almost 3 weeks here of the registry being open. And of 2.4 million firearm owner identification card holders, you've got this low turnout of actual compliance with that rule. So yesterday was the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. They're reviewing the rules that Illinois State Police filed. There's 3 different tracks they could go. They could either file a motion to suspend the rules, which would suspend the rules and essentially say that, the registry is not operating right now because the rules are suspended. That didn't happen yesterday. There are 2 other option motions that they had. One is a recommendation, which just says, hey, we're recommending that you do this, that, and the other. It's not a requirement, but we're recommending you do that. We'll get to that motion here in a moment, but a second motion that was offered but failed was the motion objecting to the rules, which wouldn't have suspended the rules, but it would have just been a vocal objection from the legislature. And that possibly could be something to have added into the court cases on all of this. So let's go ahead and hear now from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules how this played out yesterday up in Chicago.
JCAR object to the Illinois State Police emergency rulemaking titled Firearm Owner's Identification Card because the rulemaking does not meet the criteria under 1 Illinois Code 230.400A3E and A1H, which require emergency rules to be simple and clear so that the rule can be understood by the persons and groups that the rule affects, and to comply with the statutory authority and legislative intent upon which the rule is based. The rule lacks the rule lacks detailed, defined terms, which makes compliance by the regulated public improbable. Further, the rule permits broad interpretation of the terms assault weapon and assault weapon attachment outside of rule, when the legislative intent clearly indicates the list of assault weapons is to be comprehensive, detailed, and updated by the Illinois State Police as needed.
So you've got State Representative Ryan Spain as the co-chair. He talks a bit about where we're at in the process, asks for a vote on this objection.
Note that a vote to object to an emergency rule requires a majority of members present and voting on the motion. Additionally, an objection does not stop an emergency rule, and if this motion passes, the emergency rule will remain in effect. Staff, please call the roll.
So they call the roll, and the roll call comes out to essentially be split along party lines, where you've got 5 for and 5 against an objection motion in front of JCAR yesterday.
The final vote being 5 votes in the affirmative and 5 votes in opposition. As a result, this objection motion fails.
But then you have State Representative Ryan Spain, a Republican co-chair, talk about the next step, and it's a motion for offering up some recommendations.
We've had a lot of discussion on this topic as a committee. We've received many, many questions on this topic as members of JCAR. And we could really literally be here all day and night going through each one of these questions, seeking answers from the Illinois State Police. And rather than doing that, we've had discussions with the State Police, representatives of whom are here today in the room with us. They understand the very lengthy, detailed questions, areas of ambiguity that we're looking for resolution. And the State Police have agreed to respond to questions that will be generated and facilitated to them through this committee, and have agreed to also hold additional public hearings for the permanent rulemaking associated with this topic. And so we have a lot of discussion that will continue to take place. JCAR will be meeting again in Springfield in November, early November, during the second week of veto session, and then again here in Chicago in December. So expect a lot of continued discussion on this topic and an ability to provide further clarification to questions, whether they're specific firearm attachment, magazine questions, issues about private security contractors, questions about transfers in the return of firearms.
So again,
we'll all be subject to additional conversation.
State Representative Ryan Spain talking about further meetings coming up, but what was the actual resolution that passed? It's a recommendation resolution.
Rulemaking titled Firearm Owners Identification Card Act, JCAR recommend that the Illinois State Police add clarifying detail to the rulemaking, including the definitions of assault weapon and assault weapon attachment, when an individual's weapons may be returned to them upon reinstatement of a FOID card, the duration and location of affidavit exempt activities, and addressing any other comment or concerns. Furthermore, the committee recommends that ISP holds 3 public hearings on this topic and answer questions of the committee and public commenters in writing within 60 days, and update the committee on its progress at the committee's November meeting.
Thank you. Co-Chairman Cunningham moves, seconded by Representative Reich, that the motion just read be approved. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion passes.
So that is essentially how JCAR played out with the rule about the gun registry for the state of Illinois, something obviously a lot of people are interested in, not just gun owners out there, but also people who operate firearms dealers. I talked with Dan Eldridge. He owns Maxon Shooter Supply and Indoor Range in Des Plaines about the outcome yesterday. Is it what they expected when it comes to whether or not they're going to have these rules suspended, because it didn't suspend the rule yesterday. The rule was just merely offered up recommendations from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. Here is my conversation with Dan from yesterday, where he talked about what they were looking for and how the federal firearms licensees of Illinois really provided a ton of comment to get what hopefully could be at least a better process if this whole thing is upheld by the courts, which that's still in question, whether or not this gun and magazine ban is going to be upheld in the courts, though a lot of people patiently awaiting the next steps in the federal court system. Here's Dan Eldridge.
They published the rules. The state police published their rules around, especially around the registry, on September the 18th. And so we had a very limited time to respond. The dealer organization, FFLIL, did file a response before the deadline with the state police requesting 3 hearings, one in northern Illinois outside of Chicago, one in central Illinois, and one in southern Illinois. Our thinking being that it's really quite burdensome for people throughout the state to have to travel to Chicago or travel to Springfield for a public hearing. What we got out of JCAR today was it is what it is. We're glad that the call for hearings was heard, and I think the public hearings should be very informative for the state police with respect to the rules that they published.
So again, that's Dan Eldridge, conversation I had with him yesterday, and I got him to respond to Illinois State Police, who sent me a message saying that we're happy to address all questions and comments submitted to ISP, and we'll be doing so in the weeks to come. You've got ISP also saying that they already have one public hearing scheduled regarding the Protect Illinois Communities Act and are working to schedule 2 additional hearings. Now, the next hearing is November 2nd, where you've got, well, quite frankly, a whole bunch of people that are, I'm imagining, wanting to attend this public hearing. And in particular, you've got questions about the room space, because the room that they have carved out here, state police say that November 2nd, they're going to be in Springfield, room D1 of the Stratton building. Room D1 of the Stratton building at the Capitol Complex, November 2nd. And I imagine it's going to be early in the day, where you've got a bunch of people expecting to come, I imagine. But the room is tiny. There's only about 100 people that can actually fit into this room, having been on the grounds in the Capitol in this particular room watching committee hearings. There's not a lot of space in the Stratton building D1. So that's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. And if they're going to have to move it to another room, maybe there's another room at the Capitol, inside the Capitol proper, I think 118 it is, where you could fit several hundred people in there, and even standing room only, you could fit even more probably. I'm not a fire marshal, I don't know the capacities of all these rooms, but Stratton D1 is tiny, and I don't know if that's going to be able to fit all of those who may want to take part in a public meeting with Illinois State Police about these rules. I asked Dan Eldridge to respond to that and what his thoughts are on the possibility of such a small room being where Illinois State Police are going to hold this meeting. Here's Dan.
I expect that attendance at these hearings is going to be well in excess of what they could fit into that room. These rules are serious business. There's compliance risk for FFLs. There's compliance risk for manufacturers and customers, gun owners. We're talking about possible felony charges, and their rules that they published largely restated the act. They didn't educate anybody on all the ambiguity that's shot throughout this thing. Just one example: what's an instance of possession of a banned weapon? It's never really defined. Is it per firearm that's in your safe? Is it your safe? If it's examined at one time, nobody knows. And the difference between 1 and 2 offenses is significant. One's a misdemeanor, and the second one is a felony, where you're stripped of your gun rights, among other things. So it's a big deal. People are understandably quite worried about this implementation. We continue to press on multiple fronts within the courts to get the entire act struck down. But in the meantime, if we can get these rules clarified and implemented in a way that's at least less onerous, then that's a small win, but a win.
So again, Dan Eldridge, conversation I had with him yesterday. I also wanted to get his thoughts of now 10 months into this. You've got the firearms industry still very much being impacted by what they can and cannot sell to law-abiding people in Illinois. He says business has been hit.
Members have seen business decline anywhere between 10 and 50 or 60%. versus last year. This is a very seasonal business, so the right way to measure it is, how was my September versus last September? And how much of that is the ban on sales of centerfire magazine-fed rifles and other items, and how much of it is macroeconomic headwinds and higher interest rates and less discretionary spending is hard to say, but it's certainly not helpful. And as in commerce, it's not helpful. In people's ability to defend themselves, it's not helpful. And hopefully the people that are sitting in judgment on this will look at current events and understand the importance of an armed citizenry, of a prepared citizenry in terms of self-defense on an individual and on a community level, and get back to the sensible nature of people having the best tools possible with which to defend themselves.
So again, long story short, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules yesterday met. They did not even bring up a motion to suspend the gun registry rules. They did bring up a motion to object to the gun registry rules that failed along party lines, and then they brought up a motion to recommend that state police offer clarification, hold some more public hearings, and answer questions, to which Illinois State Police said they're committed to transparency with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and the public. They appreciate JCAR working with them to allow the emergency rule to remain in effect as ISP works to address the concerns raised within the statutory authority. So that's where we're at. And we still wait for any kind of outcome from the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. We'll obviously keep you posted on when that happens. But that's where we're at this moment on this Wednesday. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. And always, you can follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. You can see the work I do on Twitter to stay up to date with the latest. Or, you can also follow me here on YouTube. So if you like what you're seeing, like, subscribe. It's important to get more of you here so you can stay plugged in what's going on in Illinois because we've got plenty more to get to, all right? So stay